In this video for my Engineering 1332 class, I want to talk about the idea of capturing the designer's intent. And if you're the designer, capturing your intent when you create parts, drawings, assemblies, etc. And so to illustrate this idea, I am going to create a fairly simple set of parts and features and then talk about how they could be made differently. And so first thing I'm going to do is create a sketch, and I want to sketch on the front plane, and I'm set up to do that now. And in this sketch I'm going to create a rectangle that is attached to the origin. Let's zoom to fit that a little bit better, and I'll accept that rectangle. And now I'm going to do another rectangle that attaches here at the top and indicates a cut, and I'll accept that rectangle, and I'm going to click on this line. Actually, I need to trim this line. I'm going to trim this line, and now let's start with this very simple geometry. And the question is, what I've already built in some constraints which say that this line will be horizontal, this line will be vertical. These two lines will share this point, which is the origin of the coordinate system. Okay, and so I've mostly got horizontal and vertical constraints, and a little bit of shared and some shared point constraints. Now, let's say that all I want to do is make a slot that has a U, and I'm going to start dimensioning this thing. And so here's the question: what do I care most about in this part, and what do I want to remain unchanged, and what do I want to change when I make this part different? So let's say that today I want a part that will have a dimension of 1.4 on that, and a dimension of 1.1 here, and a dimension of 4.5 here, and a height of 2.8 here. And then what do I have that is not fully located? If I try to drag things, it'll tell me what's movable, and this is merely movable up, down. And so let me define a smart dimension of 1.3 right here, and I'm going to accept that sketch and do an extrude, and I will extrude blind a distance of about 2 inches. Okay, and there is the part. And let's pretend that today that part is 100% right. There is nothing wrong with it. But tomorrow my boss tells me that this width dimension needs to change. Now I can change it several ways. I could go into the sketcher and change it, or I can double click on this feature and I get most of the dimensions. Actually, I get all of my dimensions from the sketch right here. And I didn't want 4.5. I actually wanted 6. And I click on that, and I accept it, and I click the regenerate tool, and my part has changed. Now here's the question, here's the deal. My slot got wider. Let's pretend that I've got a mating part that must fit that slot. Okay, now on the earlier part everything was just right, but if I didn't think about it yesterday, I have sure thought about it now when I see that slot get so much wider, and I say to myself, I didn't want that. I had other ideas for what that slot ought to do when the entire part got wider. Well, if that's true, then I didn't place proper design intent into this part, And probably the easiest way to fix that is to go back into the sketcher and edit that sketch. And let me go ahead and view perpendicular. And now I say to myself, okay, what do I really want out of this part when this length, which got bigger than it was, actually changes? And what I really wanted is a slot that remained the same width. Well, if that's the case, then I need to define the width of the part with a smart dimension. And I'm going to do that. Now the system is going to tell me when I do that that I'm over constrained. And I get the choice of making this dimension driven or leave it as a driving dimension. I'm going to accept it, but then I'm going to have to get rid of something else. And so this dimension is in conflict with these yellow dimensions. And so I'm going to remove the 1.4. And now with the width of the part dimensioned and the width of my slot dimensioned, I have to leave this one undimensioned to not over constrain this thing. Now, if I wish, I could dimension this and make it driven or a reference dimension and accept it. And so it shows up differently than all these black dimensions. It shows up sort of gray as being a reference dimension, not an actual driving dimension. And now, no matter what I do to this part, my slot will always be 3.5 wide. Okay, and actually let's make this smaller. I didn't intend 3.5. I really wanted a 2.5 is what I was after. Okay, but my slot seems to prefer being off on the right of the part. I now realize when I change this geometry that I intended something else for this slot. It was actually my intent that the slot remains centered in the part, even though I may not have really created it that way the first time. That's my intent now, that no matter how I change the part, this slot always remains 2.5 wide and centered in this part. So I need to go make that happen. And if I really had wanted that to happen, I probably should have centered the part on the origin. And that actually, well, let's see if I can release this constraint and then be able to drag the part around a little bit and fix this. Sometimes I may have made such a mess of the part that I just want to start over. I release the constraint that left my left hand edge at the origin, and now what I'm going to do is use the origin and use a center line. If I really want to maintain symmetry in a part, center lines are the perfect way to do it. I'm going to create a vertical center line. And now I will start putting some real design intent to this thing. First of all, I want these two lines and the center line to form a symmetric set. Yes, there it is, symmetric. And then I want these two lines. Hold down and click on the first one, control click, control click. I want to form a symmetric set. Oops. Okay, something is incompatible with my symmetry, and I know what it is this dimension right here is totally incompatible. Let's delete that dimension, and now my geometry is happy again. Okay, and now I can tell if I'm getting my intent. If I grab, let's see what's movable first of all. I grab that line. Okay, everything can move up and down. And so what I want to do is place the origin on my bottom line. And so we're going to go with a coincident constraint. And now everything is black. Okay, and I will accept my sketch, and I'll get the part, and now let's play with the part, and I'm going to take that 6 and turn it into an 8. It's not waiting for me. Let's try it again. Double click on the 6, turn it into an 8, and regenerate. And did my slot and did my part do what I wanted? Is it centered on the origin? There's my origin. Let's view perpendicular to this face. We'll be able to see a little bit better. And there's the origin. Yes, the entire part remains symmetric about the origin, and my slot remains symmetric no matter how I change the width of the part. I have now put a little bit of my design intent into this part, knowing that I'm quite likely to change the width. Let's program this thing so that everything else automatically gives me what I want. But we'll double click on the part, and earlier I wanted a 2.8. Now I want a 5, and I will regenerate. Okay, and what I notice is my slot stays the same depth. The difference from the bottom of the slot to the bottom of the part has changed. The question is that what I intended? Or was I a little bit sloppy and did I not pay attention to something? Okay, let's pretend I was sloppy and I didn't realize until just this minute that for this slot, what I really wanted was the distance from the bottom of the slot to the bottom of the part to be to remain a constant and not the actual slot depth. I'll fix that by going back into the sketch and edit the sketch, and I will view perpendicular. And so what I see is that this 1.3 dimension is not really what I intended. What I intended to do with the smart dimension was from this line to that bottom line to produce in the part that I had, and that says make this dimension driven. It is clearly in conflict with some of these vertical dimensions. I'm going to get rid of. Okay, so I'm going to leave it driving. Okay, and now I've got to fix my problems by deleting that dimension. And what I really intended was that I need this distance between the bottom of the slot and the bottom of the part to be constant. And what I had in mind for that dimension was actually a 1 inch. And when let's see, and I should have everything in my sketch defined. Let's move that one just out a little bit. And so here's the part that I get. And if I now make my part less tall, that 5 becomes a 3. And I refresh, and the distance between the bottom of the slot and the bottom of the part is remaining fixed because that's the way I programmed this part to behave. A lot of the programming for capturing design intent comes from the sketches and the dimensioning scheme that we pick. Now, other facets of design intent might come from the fact that I did my initial sketch as a U-shaped thing rather than sketching it as a first rectangle and then maybe a cut from the front, or I could have done a cut from the top to create this slot. Choosing cut from the front or cut from the top is an aspect of design intent. And so I need to think carefully about all of those kinds of things, including when I do extrusions and it doesn't really show up on this part. But if I edit this feature, did I really want this part to extrude to one side only? Or was I hoping for symmetry of this part about my sketch plane? And so did I really intend not a blind, but a midplane of that same dimension? Now, right now, the part doesn't look any different. Okay, but its behavior will change later on if I start changing dimensions and put other things on this part. The choice between midplane and blind right now is a very important choice. And so I'm going to go with midplane with the presumption that, let's get my sketch plane showing, okay, that matches my design intent. And then if I were to change the overall extrusion width of 2 and turn it into a 5 and accept it and regenerate it and look at where my sketch plane lies. My sketch plane still lies in the middle of the part, and maybe I can implement some mirroring and symmetry for various things that I might do to this part, because I have this sketch plane in the middle of the part and not at one end. That would be another very important decision that captures my intent for when I start changing this part later. Because I might wish to dimension things not from an edge of the part, I might wish to dimension them from the center of this part, etc. Okay, well, that is a very simple early discussion of design intent, but every choice you make where you have multiple ways of doing things will affect how the part changes later, and I promise you almost every part you ever create will change later. So you'd like to design it now and set it up now so that the changes that come later will be easy. That's the idea of capturing design intent. Design it now so that when you change the things most likely to change, the part gives you what you want with almost no effort.